Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and today I'm joined by this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted. How are you doing this fine and lovely evening, sir?
Good. I think I pointed in the wrong direction this time.
That's
No.
why I never point, because I don't, I don't know, that Zoom and OBS and whatever have you, sometimes it's flipped, sometimes it's not. It's safer to just, you know what? I
Not
don't point.
point. Yeah, I like the point. Even if I'm wrong. Wah, wah, wah. So tonight we're going to be talking
Keep
about.
it that way.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Tonight we're going to be talking about non-combat encounters in Dungeons and Dragons. Although I guess it could apply to any TTRPG really. But with that, we're going to jump in, and I had one way of looking at it, and just mentioned another way, and basically I break it down into two categories. It's like an opportunity to use that non-combat stuff on your character sheet, or just straight up role playing, and for you to kind of interact with other things in the game using our imagination and role playing. You defined it differently.
Say, well, there's not an adversary. You're just dealing with a problem. So non-combat.
Ah, most of that was lost to the ether, Ted, because your sound was off.
Die. Okay, Nerdarchy Ted, do the whole usual thing. How you doing this
Mm.
fine and lovely evening, sir? Now that's out of the way. Uh, as I was saying, in regards to non-combat encounters, you know, it really depends upon the lens that you're looking through. Um, if you're like, I spent more recently the time as a dungeon master. So when you brought this topic to light, I'm like, okay, well, what what makes a non-combat encounter? Well, anything that's not combat, which to me falls anything outside of you fighting an adversary. Even if you're trying to get past a hazard, even if you're trying to get through a trap, while some combat things are there, I don't identify it as combat. Some might, and that's for you and yours to deal with, or argue with me in the comments. I'm here for it. But if you're not rolling initiative, if you're not fighting things, I say it's not combat. So that means your social encounters, that means your traps, that means your exploration. That means your puzzles, your mysteries, your things that, as you brought up, the things you would have to investigate or perceive. Anything that you would identify as a whole cloth. This is a scene. It's not a fight.
I would also add into like depending on your style of GMing and how you play the game at your table. There are also lots of opportunities to turn combat encounters into non-combat encounters, right?
100%.
That should always be an avenue open for the players to explore. Sometimes it doesn't work, right? Like the black pudding does not care, right? No matter how nice you are to it, how much you try and bribe it, it still just wants to eat you. Uh, but other monsters, intelligence monsters or creatures for that matter, may have a vested interest in not fighting. And plus, like, anytime conflict arises, you know, everyone is in peril. There's always a chance of getting injured or hurt. And, if you look at it as you're telling a story in a living, breathing world, that's a thing most sentient creatures want to avoid.
Right. So, like, again, because D&D in a castle was the most recent thing that I ran, and because I was running for players that I had not gamed with previously, I wrote a lot of my encounters with. there is a way out of this that does not involve just a fight to the death. Now, not every encounter is going to go that way. There were several encounters that the party could have, just walked away from. There was three fights that they dealt with that absolutely had an easy as in written, not necessarily easy as in achievable, way to social out of the aspect. One actually wound up happening as an improv combat because there was some misconception on the adversary side. They stepped into the Feywild, but one of the players was being pursued by somebody. So she left a message in Druidic to basically tell the people following to F off. But because it was in the Feywild, which I associated, with Sylvan and Druidic because of how tightly the Fey are to the wilds, they interpreted the message as hostile and started attacking the party. So like there wound up being a social way out of that fight, and there was some apologies for, who the message was in fact for, which led to some fun role playing thereafter. But I also put like an assassin character that was coming after the lycanthropes because it's always fun to have a different style combat encounter. And when I wrote the encounter, I gave several things to say, all right, if either of these things are said, the DC is going to be lowered to something manageable. And they pulled out all of their resources to get a astronomical check, and they convinced this guy to go fight somebody else. More importantly, go fight the guy that we're looking to fight. So he's still out there, but it was fun to see, them like, all right, we don't want to die by this guy.
That's kind of an interesting point, like that you're actually writing that stuff into your adventures, into your games. I always have those opportunities open, but I don't ever write them in. Like I just kind of react to what the players do, and if they give me something that makes sense to me in that moment, then I'm going to be like, oh yeah, that'll definitely work, or make a check, or persuade, or however we want to handle it at the table at the time, and depending on the specific circumstances. But I don't generally write it in.
Well, for the particular scenario, again, this dude was a I hate lycanthropes, and he had an ability that allowed him to kind of detect them. And he had heard rumors of lycanthrope activity in this particular region of the world, so he had wandered this way. And as the players kind of step out of an area, they're like, "Oh, look, fresh targets. I'm going to kill them." But because the adversary that they were up against was a powerful lycanthrope that was looking to make more lycanthropes, that was a target that this guy should go after. So if they had mentioned the phrase that he was looking to convert or kill anybody, and that he was the champion of Morganas, which is our god of savagery and lycanthropes, that would lessen the DC and allow him to be more easy to persuade. Uh, but they got like a check in the 30s at disadvantage, so it was a lot of resources used to get there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they haven't, but I really wish the 2024 revised would rethink what impossible is.
Sure,
Like
sure.
have you guys ever played your own game? Like how often like circumstances like that come up? Like impossible should probably be like 50.
I mean, I've been looking recently at all of the different things that can be
Mm.
done to boost a die roll,
Uh,
but it requires either like the perfectly put together party or like hiring NPCs that happen to have those kinds of things. Like reliably getting into the 30s on like non-specific things like aren't going to happen. Sure, like we've talked on the channel and I've made the character, and plenty of other people have done it as well to get the high, perception or passive perception. Um, but to just be like, oh, well, I'm going to do this thing here, it can be utterly, utterly crazy. Um, even at upper echelons of the game where it's like, okay, well, I've got expertise, so that's a plus 12. Then I've got a maxed out stat, so I'm at a 17 on the die, or 17 plus the die. So that's still, even if you roll a 20, that's still a 37. So if you're talking about getting to 50, getting another 13 points on an already critted thing, I think it's asking a lot.
Oh no, man,
Sure,
we had a couple builds where we hit 70s.
sure, but it takes an awful lot to get there.
Sure, that's ridiculous. But also, like, that's also one build, right? That's not a group working together, if you think about it. But yeah, so what one of the things, like, as far as non combat encounter, the very first part of my my D&D in a castle adventure was a bunch of skill challenges. You wrote a bunch of them actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I was like, man, if they don't like challenges, they're in for a bad time. um, but it ended up working out. Like one of the things too was one of the ones that I had created was it was basically like a war game. It was a tactical war, like tabletop war game, essentially. And I had created the rules for it, and it was kind of like I don't know. It was like combat, but it wasn't really combat. But at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, like the threshold for winning was doing damage, and the threshold for losing was taking damage. But it was very like it was not. It didn't use the standard D&D combat rules to
Right.
make that happen. And it was basically like like an attack roll check, and like if you roll really low, like your side takes damage, or if you roll really good, their side took damage. Um, so like it was basically a mini game, right? And I think that part they all had a lot of fun with because like there's several rounds of prepping for the actual war game itself, and then the war game happens, and like before that, like they get to use different knowledge based skills and investigating the room and the table, and also like they had to attune to the table like it was a magic item, and if they were trained in Arcana, they could try and cheat by manipulating the magic in the table, which they tried that once, and they're like, all right, we're not going to do that more than once. But they're like, we felt like we pulled it off, so which is cool. It gave the artificer a chance to shine, and like so that that felt like her thing. But there was a bunch of other things like mock trials, finding your way through a maze where you can't see, um, different strengths of different feats of strength and fortitude. So it was also
No,
like which each
no strength of feet.
yeah, is that too. With that, like it also gave them kind of like the opportunity to explore the world and Norse mythology as well, because those components were like interlaced into it. Um, Now, in the last time we played the Under the Dome game, like I threw in a random encounter, and I probably just used Don John because I love that site for randomness.
Mm-hmm.
It's great for one of my weaknesses as a GM is loot and loot drops, and that's like just makes it so much easier. I just keep clicking refresh until something cool shows up and be like, yep. And it's great because it'll have like really detailed, elaborate stuff, and the players are like, "What is that? What does this mean?" And it's just like treasure, like. But it makes you guys think about it all the time. But that was when like a young red dragon shows up with a couple fire elementals, and I'm like, they can fight if they want. I think you guys could have won, but I think it would have hurt a little bit. Um, but you guys decided to talk to the dragon, and we kind of used it as a way to uh you guys have this special metal, the Shadow Steel, from one of the Darkenheim books, from Dungeon Dudes. And you're like, what can we do with this? And I'm like, I don't know, research some shit, do magic shit, figure it out. And so like one of the obstacles was we like, having a forge that's hot enough to smelt the metal and work it. I was
Hmm.
like, a red dragon might be good for that. So you guys start talking with the dragon and kind of like befriending it. And I'd also like with dragons, I'm not really a stickler for the alignment system in D&D.
Right.
I still haven't decided if it's going to flat out just betray you guys at some point anyway. But
Sure.
for now, but for now, you guys are a potential combat encounter. It was turned into a role playing encounter, which now you guys are going to kind of go off and do some shit with the red dragon, to help further the plot and kind of like buff you guys a little bit for what's coming.
The fun thing about about that particular encounter, like I think the players thought I did a good job, but the characters were quite annoyed at at myself. With my sorcerer having a 19 intelligence and a 20 charisma, I'm like, you know what? Dragons are vain. I'm just gonna like every time I say something, I'm gonna offer some kind of compliment, flowery words. And I don't know whether like you were just like, okay, this is just conversation, or if like there were possible persuasion roles that were just being avoided by the way I was talking to him. But I thought
Well,
it was a lot of fun for me as a player
I
to
don't I don't always call for roles sake. Like if the flow is going and I think it makes sense, then I rather just role play it out, right? Until
sure.
its conclusion and see how it goes. And especially if you're not like you guys weren't really asking for anything crazy from the dragon anyway. So that was kind of easy. Um and I think it kind of offered to help you guys with some stuff.
Hmm.
I have to look at my notes, but probably like, oh, I need something done for me as well, so maybe we can work something out.
Right. Um, but we had to basically swear an oath that we weren't going to, take any of his stuff, tell anybody where his lair is, or start any fights. So I thought that was fun to deal with.
Yeah, and you
From
each
a
had to like swear an oath on something specifically important to you. So if you guys betray the dragon, I'll make really bad juju happen, which could be
oh,
fun. Like, especially like is if you swear an oath specifically on a thing that's really important to you, and then it's like maybe enact a curse on that player's character based on that thing. Like, you know, if you like, I think maybe you swore on magic.
I swore on my power. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So like, if you forgo your oath of something like now maybe you have to roll a 50 percentile every time you go to cast a spell to see if it works or not, something
I
like
would
that.
suck.
Well, that's the point. That is the
Yeah,
point. um so Mesto wants to know, what do you guys think of a Warforged Knowledge Domain Cleric based off of John Constantine for non-combat encounters? It's a character I've been toying with. I mean, I think the only thing really that relevant there is Warforged Knowledge Domain Cleric, and like those make great character classes for non-combat type things in general, just because they've got a lot of skills, they have expertise, plus the utility of cleric spells. So you can do a lot of stuff that isn't just bash and smash, and in this case, heal bot stuff.
I mean, my first fifth edition character was a knowledge domain cleric, so I'm all about not only cleric, but the knowledge domain. I thought was a lot of fun to play. So getting expertise in uh, Arcana and history as a cleric is really nice. And you're probably going to throw a decent stat into intelligence if you're playing that. You're probably going to take religion, maybe even nature. So you could be a very intelligent based character, even though you're a cleric. And that's a lot of power to bring to the table from a non-combat perspective.
Yeah, and in addition to that too, I don't know if that version of the Warforged has the tool thing, but I've got like two versions of the Warforged in my head.
That is an unfortunate aspect of reading so many iterations and playing so many editions. I don't know. I don't always have it all straight in my head
Oh
unless I've
yeah,
played.
specialized design. You gain one skill proficiency, one tool proficiency. So like you're rocking the skills for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
two from cleric. A skill and a tool from your race, two from your background, and then two for knowledge domain. It's a decent skill monkey.
yeah, and then it just depends too, like what tool proficiency you go with and what kind of GM you have, right? Like that
Right.
becomes a big part for the tool proficiencies because their usefulness really depends on what your GM's willing to accept. Now, I felt like Doug was always a great player because he always wanted to try and use his tool proficiencies and figure out different ways of doing it. Um, and I've done stuff like that too. But the only downside is it's dependent on your GM and how much they're going to let you use that kind of stuff for your encounters in the encounters. Like I played in a one of the 5e versions of Middle Earth that Guy Slanders had run, and I think I had proficiency in mining tool. There's something like with a statue, like a mystery, like not like a mystery, but or a riddle, but there's a problem we're trying to figure out like what happened. So I was like, well, can I use my tool proficiency in mining, from the surveying aspect of it to try and figure out like how the statue would have looked beforehand and where all the pieces are now and like kind of like reconstruct it, not physically but mentally in order to get an idea of the lay of the land and maybe like some clues as to what happened.
Mhm.
So like anytime you get a chance to do stuff like that, is always cool and it lends more depth to your character. Uh,
So
and also maybe like a opportunity for role playing with the other players.
So it is an aspect of the game that I feel like I haven't looked in depth into the new player's handbook. I am hoping that tools are a little bit better, um, though I think it's a big hope, not a lot of chance. But I feel like tool proficiencies require the player to be creative and the dungeon master to be forgiving
Yeah,
in order to actually get
or at
anything
least
out.
open.
Yeah, sorry, forgiving or open minded, I guess is
Yeah,
the proper terminology. Just because it's so often, it's like, all right, well, there's rarely does things come up that is like, oh, if you have tool proficiencies, you can do this.
yeah,
Like mining tools is, oh, you can go mine. Okay, well, what if I don't want to just be a miner? Like,
yeah. Actually, I like the fact that you mentioned earlier about like incorporating into your combat encounters ways to turn the combat aspect of it off.
mhm.
Um, is that something you've done before? I don't remember you mentioning it before, or is this something new you're trying out?
So it is something I started trying out. Oh, as a dungeon master that does D&D in a castle, I am always trying to up my game. I'm always trying to um, be ready for more. And while I, very much have the improv style where I'm ready for, people to do things that are unexpected, I am trying to look at encounters from a direction of, okay, well, is there a way to take this outside of combat if players decide to go in that direction? Um, I think it all started with this assassin when I was writing that one. That I'm like, okay, well, this could be very much a new direction. So then, as I was looking at some of the other combats, I'm like, okay, well, I want to do a variety of different things. So, like each combat that I ran was a different style of combat. One was hit and run. One was an ambush on the party. One was just a straight up. This is a fisticuffs fight. There is no way to get out of it besides survive through what's there. This one here, it was a very magic intensive party. There are undead that's being summoned, and lots of spellcasters and what have you. You try to give areas for the spellcasters in the party to use their AOE's, and the characters with specific abilities to hit multiple opponents and protect multiple allies. Like I look to try and give them moments to shine, but give them different styles of fights. Um, so as I was writing this material, that is just the direction I went, and it's probably going to be things that I consider in the future, just because it's like, well, why not? Why not give an out on the intelligent things should the players decide to do so? Um, I know we've had a couple encounters with your games recently where we were able to talk our way out of it. My character in your party is the talker. So it's like, well, maybe it was led by your example. Maybe it was just, a thought that occurred to me and I didn't connect the dots. I don't know.
Well, I feel like you've always done that, but I just feel like you've probably done what I've done is like, oh, that makes sense. Then I guess the fight's over and we're going in this different direction. But I will say, like, I think that's really useful advice for someone that maybe is a less experienced GM and or just hasn't thought of things that way. When you're designing an encounter, or then it's a combat encounter, how can you unlock the combat aspect of it, right? Or should I say lock the combat aspect of it, so that the players don't have to fight anymore if they do certain things. I think it's a really interesting design choice to incorporate those. Sometimes it's not going to make sense or it won't work, but when it does, it's a great idea. Um, and it might also be a cool idea to challenge yourself as a GM, where you go, well, this encounter probably shouldn't be able to be turned off when it comes to combat because of X. Let's just say, maybe they're undead, right? And undead generally don't really care about self-preservation when you're on the lower ends of the spectrum, right? But what if you did include a way that could turn off the combat aspect? Is there a potential riddle they could solve or problem they could overcome during the battle, where it just lets them find a specific holy symbol that once presented, the undead go back to their inner state, and the players can either dispatch them or leave them be or whatever they're going to do. It just makes it interesting in the sense of like um taking something that was a combat encounter and making it now not a combat encounter, which again is great from the player's aspect of things because it just saves so many resources. Um, Now I had run, an encounter that was going to be basically an insult challenge, flighting for Vikings. Um, is a thing they would do, and but there was a party leading up to it, and they had several different things they could do at the party, and none of them involved combat. It was either play these games that the Giants play, and they did some of that and some gambling, but there's a ton of NPCs for them to interact with, and every time they interacted with an NPC, if they made some kind of charisma check to gather information, if they rolled really well, they would unlock and uncover the Jarl's weaknesses and his pain points for trying to insult him. But if they rolled poorly, they still got information, but it was like more information of confirmation why this guy is so great at what he does, and which is still information, and if a clever player
Sure.
may find a way to use that as well.
Right.
um so like that was kind of fun, and it was a really long social encounter. Well, I wouldn't say really long. It was a social encounter that could be as long as they wanted to be, because there was a
Right.
lot of NPCs for them to converse with and work their way through. Of course, the players being the players, they found other ways to create shenanigans, in that particular scene. But for me, that was like a really fun, social encounter that it gave them chances to use other aspects of their character sheets, whether, you know, whether it was maybe the sort the bard using silvery barbs, or the or bardic inspiration for the bard, or maybe the flash of genius from artificer, and not to mention all the different skills that they had on their character sheets in conjunction with role playing. So, and then they had the exploration aspect of just like getting to know the giants and how they interacted, and realizing, oh, they're definitely not all the same, because they had different it was different giants. It wasn't just frost giants or fire giants, but like it ran the spectrum. And they also got to learn a little bit about the ordering and how other giants felt about each other based on the ordering. And then exploring the games that giants play with each other, which almost killed one of the players. But that being said, it was still technically not combat if you get pushed in the lava
Right. Right.
during a game.
So it's an aspect of when you're running these kind of non-combat encounters, you do have to kind of read the room. You have to make sure that the players are engaged. They've all got things that they can do in this non-combat encounter, and sometimes you need to know your table and know, okay, well, when have we reached the end of this? When is the time to turn off the social encounter and move to the next thing? We've gamed with so many different styles of people over the many years that Dave and I have been gaming together, that it's like we've run the gamut. Like, you can totally run, all right, tonight's all combat,
Yep.
tonight's all talkie and everywhere in between. And it's just an added fun that is why this game has so many different ways to play. That makes it great.
So, like, even like the product that we had put out several years ago, out of the box encounters, it really could have been just like called 55 things that happen, right? Because some of them were combat encounters, many of them were, but many of them weren't. Like, many of them were just something happens. What are you going to do? How are you going to interact with it? How are you going to solve this problem? How are you going to overcome this obstacle?
Yeah, and that was an aspect of the product that I love. um I feel it was incredibly useful, and the fact that many of these things can be strung together to kind of make an ongoing thing. I know several dungeon masters have done just that, to be like, all right, well, I didn't plan anything, so I'm gonna grab 17 and 19, and that's what I'll do tonight for the game. It's like, that's awesome.
I think Limitless Adventure either is putting out or did put out a product, and it's like 100 non-combat encounters. I haven't checked it out, but something like that is also really cool too. When, as a GM, you need some ideas, either you can use them whole cloth, or maybe they'll spark some ideas, or you can redress them a little bit to fit into your world. And then the other thing is, it's funny, like so many people in 5e know what a skill challenge is, but it's not in the rules anywhere. Like, when like when I was running for my table, like I don't know any of these people. I'm just meeting them. So I'm like, all right, well, this is going to be a skill challenge. You guys know what a skill challenge? And I think pretty much all of them did. And like, and some of them were pretty young. At least one of them was pretty young as a player. So it's not like they would have been playing through all the additions.
Right.
But skill challenge is like a great aspect from fourth edition that can be kind of carried over and give you different options, different ways to use things on your character sheet that aren't just like I cast fireball at it or I hit it with an axe.
I I did at least one skill challenge as well, and at least half of my table only ever played fifth. And they knew what was going on, so uh, they actually really rocked the skill challenge.
Yeah.
They only got successes.
Well, it was funny in the strength skill challenge that I
Hmm.
ran the strength trial. I I think only not all of them, at least two of them failed the challenge and did not gain the token. Like if they completed the thing, not only did it kind of put them in line to uh not only did it put them in line to overall win their trials, but they would get a token like for on the individual level. Um, so, but it was funny because the artificer like used so many resources because they were like hell bent on outbroing like the barbarian in these challenges, and they did it too. They rocked it. Really, like no, I don't think they were not trained in athletics, which was a big part of it, and they had no strength bonus. If they did, it was a negative.
That's not a bonus. That's a detriment.
Yeah, yeah. So that was pretty funny. You get cool stuff like that going on. Flash Rave, shout out to hitting stuff with an axe. Hey, listen, I love hitting stuff with an axe as much as the next guy, but sometimes you just need something different.
That is
And
true. We were looking into going axe throwing yesterday, but apparently you
you
need to be
realize that
16. So
you need to
that
be
was
16. I think I
that
realize
was
how expensive it is for four of you.
oh well, I didn't even get to that level of
uh,
interaction. We were looking online and it's like,
uh,
we'll do something together as a family, and
for 2 hours, you
apparently,
guys would have been closing in around like $200.
ouch.
Yeah, I think three of us went for 2 hours and it was like 135 to 150.
That's that's a lot.
Yeah, it's not
Um,
cheap. It's not
it
like
didn't happen.
bowling. It's not like bowling, that's for sure.
Bowling isn't as cheap as it used to be.
I will say though that our axe coach that we did get was a D&D player.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh,
He also wasn't that useful as far as axe throwing goes. Although, like, me and your sister have been axe throwing a few times at this.
sure.
Well, I mean, not that many times, a couple. But before that, we'd been there a couple. We've done it a couple times, and once you kind of get it, you kind of get it. It's not like super complex. Like, there's a thing you hit it with
But
your axe.
it was not going to fly because the 12-year-old's too young. So, oh well.
But you could have an axe throwing competition in your game. That would be a non-combat encounter.
That absolutely would.
See, listen, you might not be able to bring your kids to axe throwing in the real world, but you can take them there in the world of Dungeons and Dragons.
Indeed.
Here, roll this dice. It's just like throwing an axe. Although, for as much as it costs, I did consider putting up building a range in my yard. I feel like what it cost for us to go that time would be about what it would cost me to build it.
Well, maybe that's a project for next summer.
Okay, so this brings back memories, Flash Raven. Hey, I just joined a play by post game on Discord. It's pretty small, but I'm having a great time. I was thinking of doing my own play by post Discord server too. Have you guys done a game like this before? That and I would you have any advice on doing or running a game like that. So when we first started Nerdarchy, me and Ted got into. I don't know if anybody else was involved or if it was just me and you.
Yeah,
Uh,
it was just us.
and we actually met a couple players that ended up at our table, but by doing this, but it was a play for by post game, and it really went horrible fast. There's just some things about it that the play style that we weren't too into, and also the annoying thing about play by post was it's like if you're like super online and you respond fast, but like then you have to wait, so like you might be waiting, hours or days for the other people to chime in for the thing to move forward. So that was our experience with it, and it would there were parts that were enjoyable, parts that were very frustrating. I have no good
Yeah,
advice for you.
I do not think I would do it again unless we were like, okay, you have game time and you're going to show up. Beyond that, everything else is downtime, and you can kind of role play as things are available. But like game would happen whenever people felt like doing stuff or saying stuff. So like there were times where, oh, you'd come back, there's 119 messages on this thread. Oh my god.
Yeah, yeah. It is. I guess if you have nothing else going on and you can't play actual TTRPGs, that's a thing you could do. But it is not a substitution in my opinion.
I would rather play a video game than do a play by post.
Yeah. Well, I mean, devil's advocate. I feel like some people might enjoy the interaction with people.
Sure.
But again, I guess you could do that with video games as too, like World of Warcraft or whatever the kids are playing nowadays.
Baldur's Gate 3 probably.
Probably. Although I've been seeing a lot of ads for World of Warcraft. I don't know if they're doing a new thing or whatever. So many so that my wife is seeing them too, and she asked them. I don't know. I don't play that. Why are you asking me these questions? So what advice would you give to a GM who's prepping when it comes to building encounters out that aren't really meant to be combated?
So you have to ask yourself, what do you feel comfortable prepping, and what do you think the players are comfortable doing? Because I've seen social encounters where the players at the table aren't really good at talking, so all they want to do is roll, persuasion or deception checks. And I've seen players who are like seriously looking for the mystery, and DMs who were like, oh, roll an investigation check. So you need to be able to mesh well with the table and fulfill yours and their desires, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So if you have a bunch of dice rollers, then may I suggest skill challenges, right? Like it's what they want to do anyway. You might as well just build your social encounters like skill challenges, especially if you're trying to if it's not just role playing, but they're trying to get information or move the story forward or have things happen, then you could build it as a skill challenge. If you're not sure what that is, a quick Google search should probably give you tons of information on skill challenges, and that would work really well. Um, and like you said, for the mystery as well, like that's a great place for skill challenges, but also it's also a great place for you as the DM to build out the encounter and not necessarily like I think mystery is a terrible place to rely on dice roll a lot of time because unless you do it in a way that even with failures doesn't give them an answer, but it gives them a place to go to get answers. But
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to dead end. You don't want to dead end the players, trying to solve the mystery because they got a bad dice roll.
I would agree. And having almost dead ended my players, because of a bad dice roll, a time or two. I try to be more aware of what I say and do as a dungeon master to prevent, the story goes nowhere. I guess we just go back and twiddle our thumbs until something else happens.
Yeah, like I would recommend, like, if you're like, oh, make an investigation check. Well, if they do and they make a poor roll, that they still find a clue, but maybe they find it without the context. So now they have to figure out what the clue means, and they figure, maybe it'll point them in a different direction and add more steps to the process than there would have been otherwise. And if you keep having these steps at it, and you're trying to solve a mystery or get ahead of a serial killer or someone who's doing things behind the scenes, these extra steps is going to like tip them off, and may change the outcome, give them chances to escape, and really, could change the story arc and send it in a different direction, which is fine. But as the GM, you just have to be prepared for that, and just remember to, like, if they're going to do a thing and it's important, try not to hinge it on a die roll, because nothing will screw up your game more than that. And then also, it makes your players feel like, if no matter what they do, it doesn't really matter. So why are they making these rolls?
Completely. So we're down to our last 10-15 minutes. Any questions, you can always put them in the chat. Just put question in front of it so we know what you want us to answer.
So what do you think about putting encounters in your game that aren't combat encounters, right? How do you how do you like to indicate to the players that this is not combat, right? Because oftentimes I'll use monsters as NPCs, and I
Mm-hmm.
find the best way to make sure your players don't just attack them automatically is to put a hat on them,
A hat or monocle.
or both.
Uh, Gentleman Jack the Grick come to mind.
Also, Stanley the Beholder.
Um, for the most part, uh, while I love monsters, I have not done quite as many monstrous NPCs as you have. Um, but for the most part, I let the players do as they will, and if they think it needs fighting, and I don't think it needs fighting, maybe that's when the thing tries to talk and persuade them not to fight. Um, but usually, for most of my games, the way players know, hey, this is a fight, is I bust out the map. Like,
Yeah.
uh, when you're putting minis and terrain down, and it's like, oh, well, this is clearly a fight.
Yeah.
Um,
Although
but
I have seen some GMs will put out the encounter whether it's a fight or not. Like,
I have done that too. Um, because sometimes you just want to, show something off or do something different. Or sometimes it's about unsettling them. You put them in, some weird terrain, and they're like, oh, well, I don't know what to do here. And when you ask them, okay, well, how do you move? Where do you move? Um, that can be a whole nother thing. But I just I let the players decide what they're gonna do and then react from there. Sometimes, non-combat encounters turn into combat encounters, just like combat encounters sometimes turn into non-combat.
that is true. I've definitely played with those players where anything can be a combat encounter. And you're like, oh, god damn it. Now I need stats for these NPCs.
So, it's a tricky situation. Not everything that you're going to talk to has a stat block associated. So if players decide all of a sudden they're going to start swinging,
Yep.
that's when it could be like, wait, wait, wait. I don't want to die here, and the story might go in a different direction than what you had planned, because now, as opposed to just having a conversation, this NPC is literally pleading for their life.
So, I was going to say, like, before we had started, we talked about it, and you're kind of like, hey, you know, if it doesn't require killing, it's not a combat encounter. And I was like, well, just because you're not trying to kill something doesn't mean, something, that you can die, right? Because
Sure.
there's definitely encounters you can run where there are threats to the players, and also like as a general rule of thumb, you know, you want there to be tension and right,
Hmm.
regardless of the type of encounter it is, you want some kind of stakes out there, and combat is just one way of doing it, but really tense negotiating, or even courtship, however you want to do it, or having to run some kind of a gauntlet where like, oh, it could be hazardous and life threatening to you, but there isn't anything to actually fight or kill. It's just a thing to overcome.
I look at a lot of different things that I've run over the years that it's like, all right, well, this isn't combat, but it can absolutely be deadly or dangerous. Um, heck, even an aspect of my repercussions game where I was like, look, you guys need to be aware if you go over the edge, is it. Like, feather fall is not going to save your life. If you don't have a fly speed or a way to gain one, you're out. You're dead. There's no capping at 20 die 6 falling damage. You're falling way more than terminal velocity. Um, and there were times that through interactions could have been totally pushed off the edge. So like, those are aspects of the thing, just like your non-combat encounter that they could have been thrown into lava. Uh, Lava also does a astronomical amount of damage, and could have shut them down.
It does hurt. So, Flash Rave, there's been a couple of new systems that have been released or are getting released this year: Daggerheart, Shadow Dark, 5e 2024, Draw Steel. Are you playing any of these or excited for any new ones? So, and which I'm pronouncing that wrong, had a great answer, and they're excited for Zoo Mafia. Matter of fact, tomorrow night I'll be working with some folks on that very thing. So we are working on it. We're trying to bring it to market. When I was at Dragon Con, I did get a chance to play with the creator of Shadow Dark. She was actually one of the players in the game, so I got to experience a little bit of that, see how that runs. Um, Me and Ted both have the 5e 2024 book. I don't know about Ted, but I can say I honestly have not cracked the spine yet. Uh,
I've looked at a couple of pages. I have not gone, any deep dive. Most of what I've seen in the conversations by others who have done so is not making me super excited for it. Um, I imagine just like everything else, I'm probably going to pick through and do things along with it. Uh, I will have to see how like side by sides how classes are different to decide exactly what I'm going to do with my games because I know some people are going to want to play the new stuff, some people are going to want to play the old stuff. Um, Usually, I've been you know have to be brought begging and screaming into the new edition. Um, I think this is the first time Dave is not dragging me along.
yeah, that's
Uh,
true. Like I am the least excited. And I can't really point to any one particular thing. It's just probably all the non-game related nonsense that's going along, and just the general direction that they've taken the game, and and some of the changes they made to me seem very arbitrary and not to make a lot of sense. So we'll see. I mean, I'm sure there's some good things in there. I think they finally made True Strikes not suck. It's not quite 3.5 levels, but I think it's decent.
um, as far as other games, I've been following along with Shadow of the Weird Wizard, and I believe that's supposed to be coming out soon. Um, I know that We've talked about Shadow of the Demon Lord. This is the more fantasy version thereof of the game, and I really enjoyed Shadow of the Demon Lord. So I'm looking forward to seeing the new book and questioning how well the two systems intertwine together. Are they one and the same and just have a different backdrop, or are they completely not compatible and don't get my chocolate and the peanut butter.
I I backed Karen second edition, so I'm curious to see what that is. I had gotten a chance to play that, and that had some really interesting rules to it, and fun, really fun as far as a survival style game goes, with fantasy flavor to it. So I'm cool to see what that is. That works, and because my tongue is virtually useless when it comes to the human language. Flash Rave Zoo Mafia sounds cool. Haven't heard of that one yet. So that's a game that we're actually coming out with. We have the quick start rules, which you can grab on our website or on Drive Through RPG or itch.io. There's a bunch of places. Matter of fact, if you look in the description of this video, you can there might be a link in there. Like I said, if not, you just go to the website. In the description, we do have a link to the Kickstarter follow page. So that should be coming very soon. We've been working on that behind the scenes. So um what are give me five quick ideas that are non combat encounters. Go.
All right, so you've got a skill challenge, some kind of physical contest by a tribal society that you've been that you're gathering at their fire. You've got maybe a wizard's riddle challenge. You've got to try and stump the intelligent people by telling riddles and solving theirs. You've got a banquet, which you've gathered to join the Fae in their party, but you have to navigate the social intricacies of the Fae courts. You can't give a gift without receiving a gift, or vice versa. And maybe it even holds true with compliments. You can't just receive one and not give one in return, because that would be considered a slight. All right, so you could have a mystery to solve. You come across rooms that are laid out upon this room, and if you don't align them in the proper order within a given time, you might become trapped in the room, or they're just going to explode. Is that five, or is that only four?
I wasn't counting.
uh, I think it was five.
Nice. Chase sequences can always be fun. The real trick is to make it so it isn't just like them trying to kill whatever it is they're chasing, or if they're being chased, it's not just the combat. So a quick, easy way of doing that is whatever they're trying to get is something they cannot harm or break. So that would be one. Um, I also love the idea of unquieted spirits, where they're not actually undead, but they're restless spirits that the players kind of come upon and have to figure out. Like, they don't have to, but they can try and figure out, how to put these spirits to rest. Maybe you give them a little blessing for doing so that they get to use later on. Also encourages your players to be good guys and try and do good things, for sure. Um, I love parties. I love throwing. I've done giant parties, I've done fey parties, and it just gives the players tons of different people to interact with, and also possibly quest givers, if not now, in the future. You could also do a lady of the in the lake kind of thing, right? Where they see the reflection of a woman in a lake. Maybe she has a sword, maybe she doesn't, and she's mouthing something, and they have to figure out what she's saying and possibly solve some kind of puzzle or riddle. And maybe they receive the sword, the ring, the whatever the MacGuffin is, or maybe they receive a quest instead. Um, And also, maybe you do a uh kobolds didn't eat my baby, but they stole my baby, right? And you have to try and get them back, and they're wearing the baby like a backpack. So throwing weapons as you're trying to chase down the kobold would be definitely a bad idea, because if you miss, there's a chance that you hit that. So there's all kinds of fun things you can do without actually having to draw steel or cast spells in an offensive manner. Also, David Lowery just dropped like a bunch of ideas in the chat as well. They're all good ideas. But remember, it doesn't always have to be about killing the next thing, although sometimes that's fun too. With that, we will be back next week with another live chat and also our Gamma World game. And until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.